This exhibition describes the history of this building and its creator, civil engineer Andreas Papadopoulos and architect Phivos Polydorides. The team of psi.Foundation, the curators of this project, Dmitry Ozerkov, and myself, Daniil Parnyuk, worked a lot with archival material during the 1.5 year, not just to find the place of this amazing building in the architectural landscape of Limassol and Cyprus in general, but to find the exact place of this building on the map of the modernism in architecture on the Mediterranean. And our research was inspired but by the honored guests of tonight, the amazing, famous historical architectural Dr. Sergey Nikitin-Rimsky, and we happy to introduce him. And I would like to say that he is very famous historical. He dedicated his time to study and research in architecture around the Europe. He is not only author of the very famous, remarkable books about the architecture, which highlights the architecture of the northern Italy and others. And he is also the author and creator of the education programs. And he is the creator of the bicycle tours, night tours, special to show and highlights the landmarks, cultural and architectural buildings around the European capitals. And I would like to say that our foundation is not profit foundation, existing with a donation, and you can follow us also in social net. You can to be aware about all our programs and new projects, and to be aware what we are doing. And I would like to announce that next Saturday we will also have amazing performance. It will be opera concert, and we will make our homage to architect Phivos Polydorides, which created the sketches how to change the views of this building and create the opera house here instead of curb warehouse. And I think it will be amazing performance, acoustic performance. And I expect to see you there, here, next Saturday, 6 o'clock. And I would like to give the floor to our honored guest, Dr. Sergey Nikitin-Rimsky. And please give him warm welcome. Thank you.
So happy to see you all in this incredible building, which has restarted its life as a cultural venue for Limassol. Actually, in Limassol, you have many theaters, you have cinemas, but still this is something special. I would call it antipasti of the bigger study that I started a few years ago when I first came to Cyprus in 2020, and then that was developed thanks to my partners in Sphere Cyprus. And actually it all brought me here to the Carab warehouse, Carab silo, where we all know. And the reason why I think it's still interesting to talk about these things back to the 1950s and back to the 1960s is the dignity, bringing back the dignity to the generation of artists and architects and engineers who's been creating so much with such a big enthusiasm, and they actually created the contemporary Limassol. I hope you've seen the exhibition next door. Wonderful exhibition, and I've seen myself some of the objects that I've never seen before. I'm very happy that there is such an acknowledgement for two people who built so much in this place, in the city. And also, when we're talking about Andreas Papadopoulos, also built a lot across the Cyprus, across the island, and became, I would say, a nationwide character of the history of this country. In my presentation, which I call incomplete presentation, I would like to talk about few other people to make a contextual view how this all came to existence. This building and the whole season of modernist architecture in Cyprus, because this is the industrial gem of Cyprus. I think my colleagues who are here, they would admit that it's the only one industrial architecture piece which is so original, but at the same time, it is a part of the sequence of the buildings that were being built in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and also in the 80s. And luckily enough, this kind of architecture is fashionable once again. And I'm so happy to show also to visitors of my tour guides the new buildings that are being built following the style of 1960s as a reverence to what was this beautiful, enthusiastic period of Cyprus history. But let's start. I called it Men and Stories. Men and Stories because yes, it's mostly about men, and you can't build without men. You need some men. You can have concrete, but you also need some men, back to the 1960s. And some stories. It's still a very incomplete vision that I'm trying to knit, sew it out, and also to present to you. We are in the place which is the land that was acquired by the cooperative of carob tree of Limassol immediately after the Second World War. They bought this land, and you see still this small scale, one-story buildings. They're still there. They're surrounding us. They were built, I would say, they were supervised by Roussos and Pericleos, probably the most important guys in architecture industry in Limassol in 40s, 50s, and also, yes, even a little bit before. What was here was a typical storage buildings. And then it was once a year in October, November, when carob was being gathered. This little street that you all took to come here, it should be traduced in English, cooperative street, because it goes directly between two important cooperative of carob and also cooperative of wine. This road became full with these lorries, but not only with lorries. No, if you look better, you will see that these are actually buses carrying carob to the storage, to the site. And so you needed to have also some little shops along the street, because people were actually sleeping inside, waiting for their buses, their lorries to be dismounted from all this carob carriage. But it was busy only during this harvest period, end of autumn, and then beginning of December. We can't imagine how important was carob back then. So I've taken citation from a book of Christakis Sergides, who was also the chief expert and also advisor in my researches here in Limassol. And he's with us. I'm very, very happy to see him here. And you see that carob is actually, I will read it. It was development of shipping mostly due to Limassol wine and carob industries, coupled with increasing urbanization that led to a fast Europeanization of the city and the population. Carob was the reason, carob was the message, carob was money. It's so hard to believe it, but let's go to the facts. In 1951, carobs were £5 a bushel, and very many growers picked over 100 bushels. So they collected 500 pounds. Company managers back then in Limassol, in Nicosia, they were normally receiving a salary of 300 pounds. And a member of Limassol cooperative, carob cooperative, could receive 500 pounds for the whole year. So he was richer than a private company officer. Can you imagine this? But what is more important, we know that carob is being called the black gold of Cyprus. And in this case, you can make a parallel with the petrol. It's something that you have. You don't need to do almost nothing to have it. The same thing with carob trees, because carob trees need really little care and little pruning during the season. So most of the people who were receiving this huge money, 500 pounds, once again, double as the president of cooperative was receiving here. This money they were receiving just because they were collecting the fruits from the trees and they were putting them into these buses to be brought here on the site of cooperative. And I think the history of architecture is normally being told by architects and not by historians. So we normally talk about how important was architect Palladio, and we don't talk about clients who were sometimes very important collaborators of ideas of Palladio. Samely also for the architecture of the 20th century. Every great piece of architecture, every interesting piece of architecture is normally the result of collaboration between illuminated client and good architect. If the client is shy and the architect is brilliant, the architect just makes an expression of his wills, and normally this building sucks. But when the client knows what he needs to have, when the client knows what he needs to obtain, that makes really great, interesting things coming out. And here, in case of this building, we have a figure of the guy, Takis Konstantino. He was a really young man back then. He finished school, and immediately after the school, no, not immediately, but during his school days, he was still 15, I think, when he started to play for Limassol football team, IL. And he was quite a successful player. 2 years after he finished the school, and he was proposed, he was not proposed, he went to the business interview here to Limassol Carob Cooperative because he desperately needed some work. He didn't have a father, so he had all the family was waiting for him to be working and bring some money back home. So he came here and he was interviewed. And he was, as he told me, he was the only one who could read and write English, who could use the typewriter. All the other candidates, this is a very important, remarkable feature. All the other candidates were friends and relatives of the members of cooperative. So it was a difficult meeting because, of course, the members of cooperative wanted their dear ones to take this place as a secretary of cooperative. But still, as soon as Takis could work with a typewriter and could translate from English to Greek, from Greek to English, he was accepted. He was accepted, and he remained the chief of this cooperative for 45 years. Incredible. He didn't win the medal, actually. I think this is one of his bigger frustrations, that he didn't win the medal with Ayel because he could have to. But he took the job. This is one of the pictures that he is exposed in his house. Takis Konstantinou comes to take this job, and he's teenager yesterday. He's 20 years old, but he starts immediately to push for mechanization of cooperative. He realized that it's a very long way, but still he starts to propose. He say, let's buy this machine, let's buy that machine. And it's not that easy. It's not that easy, because if you buy a machine, you need to leave some people without work. This creates tension. And in his interview, he told me that there were many moments when people were criticizing him, the members of cooperative. You're buying these machines and you are making our people losing their job. But the work for cooperative here was tremendous. It was not an easy work like collecting carobs. Here people actually not only was working, they were sleeping during the harvest period, not only in their lorries and buses, but also inside the buildings. This building was not yet built. The whole business was huge, and throughout all of his career, Takis was trying to propose new and new stuff. His own autobiography, he wrote it, where he put all his proposals that were accepted and also those of them who were not accepted. He was also pushing in the 80s for introducing electronics. So he was a very active guy, very interesting person who only finished the school. He didn't have any big university background as his children later. Yes, I would like also you to see this quote. This is the quote from the interview with Takis, where he speaks of these miserable conditions of workers who worked for cooperative here in Limassol. And a very good thing, savior of farmers. This is how he loved being claimed for all the things that he made for this carob industry. But carob industry didn't have much time to develop. And sadly, already in the 70s, the whole economical situation with interest for carob became blinking and blinking. So actually, the money that were so big back in the 50s were almost nothing. The prices remained the same. They never changed. And so what was very profitable institution in the 50s and 60s became not a very profitable and finally not profitable institution almost anymore. The big question, who started this building? How this building came alive, came to being? There are two possibilities. One possibility is that Andreas Papadopoulos, who is the engineer and author of this building, this is something that Takis Konstantinou told me when we were meeting and recording interview. It's also possible because what we know from the character of these two people, Andreas Papadopoulos and Phivos Polidoridis of Tekton, these two guys wanted to promote not only contemporary architecture in Cyprus, but also they were keen and thinking about mechanization. So actually, what we know about Takis Konstantinou now is something that he was into the same things. He wanted to develop this country and to develop carob cooperative as mechanical as it was possible. The other option could be, of course, that it was Takis Konstantinos that was asking people, do you know someone, some engineer? But this is not that probable. I think he remembered that fine. If he remembers that fine, at this moment, we have the precise moment where this meeting could happen. And I think this meeting happened exactly immediately after the release of Andreas Papadopoulos from the British jail. It happened in February 59. How Andreas Papadopoulos ended up in the British jail. Before meeting Elena Lamari, which is sitting here, I was completely sure that British just took him for no reason, because sometimes it happens, right? They take someone and you think, boom, he's not guilty. But then Elena suggested me to read a book from the #1 of IOCA in Limassol. And I found out that Andreas was actually number two of IOCA in industrial center of Cyprus, in the city which always had a very difficult political situation, those days especially, because there was a strong communist party, and at the same time there was IOCA, and the British, and also Turkish organizations. So he was not just a person, just a member of IOCA. But the second question was how he was connected to the organization. I need to introduce two people because we can't talk about this history of Andreas Papadopoulos without knowing these two key characters. These two characters are Archbishop Macarius III and Colonel Grivas, nicknamed Grivas Digenis. Grivas became enrolled into the Greek army, and he was fighting all through the Second World War. And what is very important, he was also active immediately after the war, when the Second World War degenerated into terrible Greek civil war, which I suppose we should call the first war of the Cold War, because this was the war between local communists, Greek communists, and the Greek monarchy, right-hand Greek society people. That was a terrible, atrocious, I would say typically Balkanian kind of war, with a lot of victims from both sides, a lot of innocent people dying because of these attacks, and more importantly, lots of people running out from Greece during this war and immediately after this war. And General Grivas is a part of this story. He is from the right from the right wing of political system. And these are also the years when Andreas Papadopoulos comes to Athens. We normally think, okay, the war is over. 1945, everything is over. Japan, Germany, everything is over. But unfortunately, that was only the start of the second phase for the Greece. Andreas is there, and he's reading the news, he's watching the news, he's hearing about these atrocities that are happening in Greece between these two political parties. And Macarius, who was a well-educated Cyprus bishop, and these two people, Macarius and Grivas, they meet and they create what we know now as IOCA, which was the organization for unification of Cyprus with the Greece. It's a very big, long, and complicated story, but we can't talk about this building without understanding what was Cyprus back then. This was one of the last pictures when probably Macarius felt that he could count on General Grievous, because later their ways were dramatically split. And now a few words and a portrait of the creator of this building. We already mentioned his name. You've seen his beautiful pictures in the exhibition. He's coming back to Limassol. He's coming back to Limassol in 1954, and he starts to work with a friend of him, Phivos Polidoridis, his partner. As we can suggest, they met on Molos, because everyone was meeting each other on Molos back then. They were well educated. It was not that common back then in Cyprus. And they decided to not only, to work together, they decided to create the brand. So they were really ambitious people. So not just being Mr. X and Mr. Y, but just trying to construct the brand of themselves. That was a very clever thing. And I would, in the end, I will tell something about my consideration why they choose this name for their company. So Andreas Papadopoulos, as I told, he was detained by the British. And I was absolutely sure that this nice, elegant, I would say young, but mature man would never be a real active member of the war organization, military organization, which was IOCA. But what we know from the sources, he's the guy behind the mining Akrotiri air base, which was a military base. He was actually creating these mines, time bombs to be precise, with his own hands, somewhere nearby at the Sodop cooperative premises. So next time you will see Sodop, think about what was doing there our Andreas. And what is even more important, and he built the hideout for General Grievous. Well, he was not yet General Grievous. He was Digenis, the number one in the whole IOCA movement. Digenis needed a place to stay in Limassol. This was a very paradoxical idea. He was staying in Troodos Mountains, but in the same time, he thought he needed to be in Limassol because this was the center point of things. And this is how they found a guy one of the members of the organization, who told, well, you can stay at my petrol station or nearby. And Andreas Papadopoulos was him and another member of IOCA, and they dug this hideout that was accessible from the kitchen of the small house. And Grievous was never found. Andreas was arrested, so the British were close to know where Grievous, and Andreas was tortured, but he never revealed where he made this hideout for the leader of IOCA. Let's go back to the independence. 1959, February, all the political arrested members of IOCA are finally liberated. And I think that was the moment when Andreas is back to work actively, because we know that Phivos Polidoridis was bringing him to prison, the drawings, the projects, and Andreas was working on them. I know it sounds like a film. It's actually a big movie. Just to imagine this different lives of this man. I think that 59 was the moment when they approached together with Phivos for the new clients, and they could approach Carab Cooperative in Limassol. And I asked openly Takis Konstantinou, who was the commissioner, did you choose Andreas because Andreas was already a celebrated political figure. And he told me, no, we didn't choose him because of his political beliefs. We didn't want to please one party or another. We wanted something new. And Andreas captured attention of Takis because he proposed to build this storage and saving lots of money. So initially, Takis told me the directors, all Cyprus cooperative movement, they were a little bit unsure about this typology of building because they never seen something parabolic. But then when Takis showed that this was actually so cheap for them, they agreed. Money was given, and then they started to work. But Andreas didn't have much time to concentrate on his engineering and architecture things because he was elected to be a member of parliament, the first parliament of Cyprus. I was asking because knowing a little bit the character of Andreas Papadopoulos, I have an idea that he was not someone who was pushing himself. I'm almost sure that it was Makarios and people of Makarios that needed someone like him to be sitting in the parliament of Cyprus. And then immediately after, I think it was only 1 month and a half, 2 months after, Makarios took him and made him the minister in the first government of Cyprus. Once again, why Makarios choose Andreas? And the response is that he was one of the few really well-educated people back then. And in the same time, someone who risked his life for the whole political issue of Cyprus. So 2 things made Makarios think that he would be a great choice. And Andreas became, I think, one of the greatest ministers in the history of this country. When we are preparing a book about this building. And when I started to analyze how many things he managed to do as a minister, it's incredible amount of different things. He was a minister of infrastructure and the roads, but in the same time, he was into antiquities. Department of Antiquities was also back then a part of Ministry of Roads and Infrastructure. Cyprus was united, but it was a very poor country. Everything was missing. People like Andreas, they were starting everything from the real scratch. I think one of the most important things that he brought to this country, and which deserves a great recognition, is the foundation of the shipping trade. Here you see the image from the first commercial port of Cyprus, which was in Famagosta, and it was opened in 1963. Now it's impossible to imagine that Cyprus didn't have its vessels. It all started with Andreas because he thought this country is born to have its own captains and its own vessels. I would also pay attention that he proposed an international view on the jurisdiction of this fleet, because since the beginning he was saying, you don't have to be Cypriot citizen to have a vessel registered in our Cyprus fleet. It was very innovative for Europe that was destroyed by nationalisms of the Second World War. And his personal idea was that you need to give the education, promote education. And his great idea was also sending talented young people to the academies in Greece to educate them. And together with Olga Papadopoulou, we talked with one of the young gentlemen back in the 50s who was sent by Andreas to learn the art of being a captain to Athens. These people didn't have any money to pay for this academy. The country itself didn't have money to pay for this academy, but Andreas managed to have a personal accordance with Greek establishment. And so for a few years, they were going there. Why only for a few years? Because then Andreas decided to leave his minister position. But before he left his minister position, and just to remind you that this is today, the Cyprus is the third largest fleet in the European Union. And that's practically because of Andreas. He was he was active, I think, in every field. I still need to make some researches in the Department of Antiquities in Nicosia to find out how his role is recorded there. But I have a wonderful article. I've read a wonderful article that was sent to me by Olga, interview with Andreas Papadopoulos in the water on the beach next to Kition, and he's talking with a journalist. Can you imagine a journalist interviewing the minister on the beach and saying, "Oh, we have this minister who is always in motion, and now he's swimming." And you've seen the exhibition starts with a vessel which is similar to the one that was in possession of Andreas. And Andreas immediately starts to talk about tourist orientation. He says, we should change the name of this road to Kition Road, so tourists know where to go. Even on the beach with a journalist, he is trying to reconnect all the pieces. He is thinking about restoration. He is thinking about tourists. And of course, he was present, and he was, I think, one of the guys who pushed for the idea to make the monuments work and entertain. And we have wonderful pictures from the family archive where we see people, enthusiastic crowds at the theaters of ancient sites of Cyprus that now we all know. I show here the picture of Salamis, which is now in the Turkish part of the island, which was also opened as an archaeological zone for the first time during the brief but very fruitful period of Andreas. I have to show you this fantastic picture, which is the wedding of Elena and Andreas. And you see here members of the government of Cyprus who joined this ceremony, this holy ceremony, which happened in Aya Triada Church in Limassol. And then Andreas leaves this position. So we have two absolutely different characters. Takis, who spent all of his life trying to save the collectors of carob, save them from the rats, save them from the taxes, save them from ignorance sometimes. And from another point of view, we have someone who wanted to be the sole professional. And I would only talk about these two first very important things that Andreas participated, was the Germasoia Dam. Thanks to this dam, this city had water, and hopefully will continue to have water, and Amatus Beach Hotel. Andreas was, I would say, directing these works. He was not the planner. He didn't create the plans for these things, but still he was inside this. I think that was at this moment we are talking about the late 60s, was the biggest public structural engineer project in all Cyprus. And immediately after, in Cyprus, of course, it's always a matter of friends and school friends. His lifetime friendship with Leonidis brings him another important commission. He's one of the members of the team which builds Amatus Hotel. Amatus Hotel we need also to mention another man in this story, Fotis Kolakides, who is normally remembered as a long-time mayor of Limassol during very difficult times in 70s and 80s. But he was a very successful architect and also ambitious, so much that he went to study with the founder of Bauhaus, with Walter Gropius. Back then, Walter Gropius, of course, was not anymore in Bauhaus. He was living in the States. And Fotis went to study with him in Boston. And after that, Fotis tried to convince him to work in Cyprus. And first, it was a minor commission, building some private house. And then they made this wonderful hotel together, which is still beautiful. I hope you've seen it. If not, you should definitely visit this site. It looks now like a very modest hotel, but it used to be the first luxury hotel in this city. And when it was built, as far as I know, people were asking themselves, why they are building this hotel in Limassol? We are a working city. And then 1974 happened, and Republic of Cyprus lost glorious beaches around Famagosta. And at this point, Limassol started to develop its tourist area, and Amatus was the foundation stone of the story. And final thing, little thing to finalize the story, why these two men, Polydoridis and Papadopoulos, choose the name for their company, called it Tekton. I have an explanation. I think behind this, not only what you see in the exhibition, which is also right, but I think behind that was admiration for a very successful British architecture company, which was still active in the 50s. And the name of this company was Tekton. This Tekton company became first famous for daring constructions of the swimming pools in the zoos. We are in the 1930s, and they continued to build very interesting things using concrete in an innovative way, like we see it here and like we see it in the municipal garden kiosk cafe, which is unfortunately is still ruined and needs restoration. So I think they choose the name Tekton because they also wanted to continue what was Tekton doing in Britain in 1930s, 40s, and 50s. I would like to sum this introduction to this incredible season, incredible moment of history, of tension, innovation, enthusiasm. That was 1960, when Republic of Cyprus finally came to existence, obtained the independence, and in the same time, this building was being built. In some way, I think this is how we also can commemorate the 65 years of the Republic. That's all. Thanks.